The CISO just flagged the logs. Every customer interaction we've routed through Meta's cloud is currently being used to train their generic retail models.
So we're paying Meta to strip mine our proprietary logic. We're literally subsidizing our own replacement while they hand our secrets to the competition.
Legally, they own the brain if we use their cloud. To stop the bleed, we must move the intelligence to a private Llama cluster.
Then pull the plug. If we don't own the logic, we don't own the customer. We're just renting our brand back from Zuckerberg.
Welcome to this deep dive on the CRM Position podcast. I mean, if you are sitting in a war room right now in 2026, you already know the landscape has fundamentally shifted.
Oh, absolutely.
Relying entirely on the public cloud, well, it's no longer the corporate flex it was 5 years ago. It has become an existential corporate risk. Today, we are unpacking this unavoidable tension.
Right, because you need the reach, right.
Exactly. You absolutely need the 3 billion user reach of WhatsApp to connect with your customers. But if you put your CRM intelligence on Meta's cloud to process those interactions, you are actively training your own replacement.
Yeah, I mean, we are looking at a complete operational failure across the enterprise landscape right now. So today, we're breaking down why outsourcing your intelligence layer to a public channel provider is just a catastrophic strategic error.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we are going to give you the exact playbook to deploy a hybrid sovereignty model using an on-premise Llama 4 setup. Because right now, way too many enterprises are, willingly handing over their competitive advantage just to save a few dollars on server maintenance.
Yeah, let's unpack this because I really want to understand the exact mechanics of how we got here.
Right.
We have to trace this back to the operational shift that forced the crisis in the first place.
Right.
I'm talking about 2025, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Meta announced the deprecation of the on-premise SDK, for anyone who wasn't in the trenches during that migration, what actually happened under the hood?
Well, the deprecation of that SDK was, it was the absolute inflection point for enterprise architecture. Prior to 2025, if you were a bank or a healthcare provider, you could self-host the messaging layer of WhatsApp.
Okay.
You basically downloaded their software development kit, you ran it on your own bare metal servers, and you had total perimeter control. Meta acted merely as a pipe.
Just a dumb pipe.
Exactly. But when they deprecated that SDK, they forced everyone to migrate the actual infrastructure of message delivery over to their centralized cloud.
But wait, if I'm a CTO looking at my balance sheet last year, my finance team probably threw a party when that happened, right?
Oh, they definitely did.
Because the accepted narrative was that migrating to the Meta cloud was, what, roughly 40% cheaper to maintain than running those old on-premise nodes?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to patch servers. I didn't have to manage uptime. I took the discount. So what exactly did I trade away?
You traded away the reasoning layer, and frankly, that is the trap. Finance departments, they looked at the line items and cheered for the maintenance discount, completely failing to understand the architectural compromise. You took the proprietary logic, the logic that determines how your company handles a complex refund, how it negotiates a B2B contract, how it triages a sensitive medical symptom,
Right.
and you just handed it over to a third-party server farm.
Architecturally, I look at this as the separation of the brain and the mouth. I mean, the WhatsApp Cloud API is simply the mouth. It is the delivery mechanism that speaks to the customer.
Yes.
The brain is your intent processing, your logic, your proprietary decision trees.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that enterprise leaders are failing right now because they are keeping both the brain and the mouth on Meta's infrastructure just out of sheer operational convenience.
Yeah, let me put that into an operational perspective. Putting your intent processing on Meta's cloud is it's like handing your biggest rival your master corporate playbook just so you can borrow their delivery trucks. Yes, you get the delivery, the package arrives at the customer's door, but you eventually lose the business because now the owner of that delivery truck knows exactly what you sell, who you sell it to, what time they buy, and exactly how you negotiate the price.
Okay, let me challenge that slightly. I understand the metaphor, but how does the mechanism actually work? I mean, it's not like engineers at Meta are sitting there manually reading our specific refund policies.
No, of course not.
So how exactly does processing intent on their cloud feed the giant, as you say?
It comes down to how large language models are trained on continuous interaction loops. Meta is building generic business assistants, right?
Right.
So when you use their cloud to process intent, when you rely on their natural language tools to determine if your customer is angry or ready to upgrade or asking for a human agent, their models observe that mapping.
Ah, see.
They see the input query from the user, and they observe the successful logical resolution provided by your CRM. You are feeding their models the exact high-value permutations of your proprietary business intelligence at scale, millions of times a day.
Wow.
To survive this, you have to starve the giant. You must starve them of your reasoning layer while still utilizing their delivery network.
So if I'm an executive listening to this deep dive, and I migrated everything to Meta's cloud last year because of that deprecation, you're telling me I made a massive error.
A huge one, yeah.
Let's move from the theory of this failure to the actual incidents playing out. You brought 3 real war room scenarios from the research that organizations are dealing with right now. Let's start with scenario 1, the deprecation blind spot.
Yeah, so when that 2025 deprecation hit, we saw sheer executive panic. The mistake they made was a profound lack of architectural discipline. In their rush to maintain connectivity with those 3 billion users, they forklifted everything to the cloud. They migrated the messaging channel, which was indeed mandatory, but they also dragged the reasoning layer along with it, which was absolutely not mandatory.
They missed the nuance of the mandate. I mean, Meta forced the delivery mechanism to the cloud, but enterprises still maintain the legal and technical right to keep the underlying model, the intelligence on-premise. They basically panicked and threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Precisely. And that unforced error leads directly into scenario 2, which is where the surgical reality of governance absolutely obliterates the balance sheet.
Oh, this is the big one.
Yeah, I'm talking about the $10 million breach alert under the 2026 AI Governance Acts in both the EU and the US.
I really want to dig into this because the rules of engagement for processing sensitive data have fundamentally shifted this year. If you are parsing customer intent for banking or healthcare over a public cloud infrastructure, you are now legally operating outside of a sovereign perimeter. But why is the penalty so severe?
Because the regulators finally caught up to the technology. The 2026 Acts established that if a regulatory body determines your customer's financial intent or medical data was utilized in a generic model training sweep on a public cloud, it constitutes a catastrophic sovereignty breach, and the fines are staggering. A single incident can easily exceed $10 million.
Which completely destroys the "we saved 40% on server costs" argument.
It completely vaporizes it. I mean, I still hear CTOs defending the public cloud on cost alone, but it is no longer a cost-saving measure. It is a massive, unhedged liability on the balance sheet.
Right.
In highly regulated industries, privacy is no longer just a marketing feature you put on a landing page. It is a $10 million defensive moat.
I'm tracking with you on the legal exposure, but this brings up the most common pushback I hear from technical architects. And this leads us to scenario 3, the metadata bleed, or what some call the transition gap.
Yeah, the encryption argument.
Exactly. When I bring up data sovereignty, architects immediately hide behind encryption. They tell me, we don't have a problem. The payload is encrypted via the Signal protocol the moment it hits the MetaCloud API. Nobody can read the messages.
And that false sense of security is exactly what gets an enterprise dismantled in 2026.
Wait, really?
Oh, absolutely. The painful truth about the Signal protocol, or any end-to-end encryption in this context, is that it only protects the content of the specific message.
Yeah.
It does absolutely nothing to protect the context. The metadata is entirely visible.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this mechanism correctly. When a message leaves a company's private network and crosses the internet to hit Meta's cloud API, it travels inside what we call a routing envelope.
Yes.
Think of it like putting a highly classified document inside a locked titanium safe. But then you place that safe inside a completely transparent, brightly lit glass car to drive it across town.
That's a great way to put it.
Meta can't see the document. That's the Signal encryption. But they can see exactly what time the glass car leaves your headquarters. They can see that it drives straight to a specific bank. They see that it parks there for exactly 4 minutes, and they see it speed off to a pharmacy right after.
That is the perfect visualization of the transition gap. Meta sees exactly who talked to whom. They see what time the session started, they log the latency between responses, the total number of messages exchanged, and the historical frequency of those interactions.
But how does an AI model actually use that? If they can't read the text, how does knowing the car parked at the bank help them train a retail model?
Graph networks and pattern recognition. I mean, they don't need to read the specific text to know that a user who pings a retail bank 4 times at 2:00 a.m. with rapid-fire encrypted payloads and receives equally rapid automated responses is a distressed customer interacting with an automated fraud resolution tree.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, when you aggregate billions of those latency and frequency patterns, you can train a highly sophisticated generic assistant on the structural rhythm of banking support without ever reading a single word of the conversations.
So, to summarize the absolute mess we are in, the metadata is bleeding through the transition gap, the governance fines for a sovereignty breach are catastrophic, and the current cloud-only architecture is a fundamental failure. Let's pivot to the solution.
Yes, let's get to the fix.
You brought an exact, practical, 5-step operational playbook to deploy hybrid sovereignty today. Step 1 is adopting the premium private AI posture. What is the uncompromising baseline here?
For finance, healthcare, and any regulated enterprise, the baseline is structural separation. You must fundamentally decouple your delivery channels from your reasoning layer. They can no longer live in the same environment.
Which takes us to step 2. Downgrading WhatsApp to a dumb terminal. Now, I have to push back hard on this. Isn't the entire appeal of using the WhatsApp Cloud API the rich feature set?
Normally, yes.
I mean, it has built-in natural language processing, intent recognition, automated routing. If we strip all of that out, aren't we just making our own developers' lives incredibly difficult?
You are making their lives harder, yes. And you are saving your company.
Yeah, fair enough.
I am aggressively clear with teams about this. You must stop letting the public cloud parse natural language. You stop using their intent recognition features immediately.
Yeah.
You configure that API purely to send and receive JSON payloads.
Let's define that for anyone outside the development team. JSON JavaScript object notation is just a highly standardized, lightweight format for storing and transporting raw text data.
Exactly. It has no logic. It has no reasoning. If your cloud connection is doing anything other than receiving a JSON payload and rendering that raw text on the customer's glass screen, you have surrendered the perimeter. WhatsApp must become nothing more than a dumb, glowing screen.
That structural shift demands heavy lifting behind the scenes. Which brings us to the hardware reality. Step 3. Deploying the private cluster. If the cloud isn't doing the thinking anymore, someone has to.
Right. To process those incoming JSON payloads, you need dedicated private computing power. You need to stand up open source models, specifically Llama 3.1 or Llama 4 on private GPU clusters.
And we're talking about 2 specific deployment paths here, right?
Yeah.
Either strictly on bare metal on-premise server racks that you physically own, or within a highly locked down VPC, a virtual private class.
Correct. A VPC isolates your computing environment even if it sits within a broader cloud provider's data center. It prevents the noisy neighbor problem and ensures your memory states aren't shared.
Okay.
But the non-negotiable rule is that the hardware running the model weights must be under your exclusive administrative control. No third-party API calls.
Which is the perfect setup for step 4,
Mm-hmm.
executing intent behind the firewall.
This is where the actual work happens. When the dumb terminal sends the customer's raw text to your private cluster, your in-house Llama model takes over.
Right.
Deciphering what the customer actually wants, executing the database lookup for their account history, deciding the next best action. All of that cognitive processing happens exclusively within your own perimeter. The reasoning layer cannot touch the public internet until the finalized response is generated and sent back as a dumb string of text.
And this culminates in step 5, operationalizing hybrid sovereignty. This is the synthesis of everything we've discussed. Channel on the cloud, brain in the house.
Exactly.
You maintain your crucial access to those 3 billion users on WhatsApp. Do not sacrifice an inch of your reach, but you completely structurally sever Meta's supply line to your proprietary logic.
You isolate the delivery truck from the corporate playbook. It is the only way to operate securely under the 2026 regulations.
That sounds like a bulletproof architecture. But I want to pivot to the controversial take here, because your research points to an uncomfortable reality that we have to face.
Yeah, it's not a silver bullet.
Even if a CTO executes this 5-step playbook flawlessly, even with the perfect Llama 4 bare metal deployment, you argue that enterprises are still bleeding competitive intelligence.
They are. And, this is a permanent reality that boards of directors really struggle to accept. We discussed the transition gap and the routing envelope earlier. Architecturally, you can secure the payload and you can pull the reasoning layer entirely in-house. But by using their delivery channel to reach the customer, Meta inevitably maps your network.
Because they still see the glass car driving around town.
Precisely. They are relentlessly aggregating your metadata, the frequency of messages, the timing of the interactions, the node-to-node connections. Even if they can't read the lyrics of your business, they are constantly observing the rhythm.
Right.
And they use that rhythm to train their generic assistants on the cadence of global commerce.
It forces a really uncomfortable realization. As long as you are using their roads, you can never completely hide your footprints. The metadata bleed isn't an engineering bug. It is the permanent tax of reaching 3 billion users in the modern platform economy.
It is a tax you have to pay, but, it is a managed, acceptable risk compared to the catastrophic failure of surrendering the entire reasoning layer. You can survive the metadata tax. You cannot survive handing over your corporate playbook.
We need to translate these harsh operational realities into immediate, uncompromising next actions. We aren't just going to leave you with architectural theory. Based on this deep dive, here are the 3 concrete steps you must take this week. First, audit your WhatsApp Cloud API connections by Friday.
Pull the architecture diagrams and look at the logs.
Right. Verify that absolutely nothing but dumb JSON payloads are crossing the wire. If you see any intent resolution, automated routing, or natural language processing happening on the cloud side, shut it down.
Second, run the hard math. Stop looking at that 40% maintenance discount in a vacuum. Cost out a private Llama 4 GPU cluster today. Look at the capital expenditure for bare metal or a locked-down VPC and compare that directly against the $10 million penalty of a single 2026 AI Governance Act breach.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you model the actual regulatory risk exposure, the private cluster pays for itself the moment you turn it on.
And third, relocate your intent. Rip your intent resolution out of the public cloud entirely. Deploy it behind your firewall on your private Llama infrastructure before the end of the next quarter. The deprecation window is closed. The time for complacency is over.
Look at your architecture right now. If your entire CRM intelligence currently lives in Meta's cloud, what exactly is your company's proprietary value by the end of 2026?
And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over on your own. As open source models like Llama get exponentially more sophisticated and cheaper to run, are we hurtling toward a future where the underlying reasoning intelligence becomes entirely commoditized? If every enterprise on Earth can run a genius-level AI on a private server in their basement, does keeping it on-premise even give you a competitive edge anymore? Or will your only true lasting advantage simply be the raw historical customer data that you manage to keep hidden from the public cloud? It's a fundamental question about where value actually lives in the next decade.
To stay ahead of real CRM and AI platform shifts like this one, subscribe to the CRM Position podcast. This is where we break down complex governance and operational realities without the hype. If you want to understand the real state of the art and not just the vendor marketing narratives, hit subscribe.